City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded September 6, 2022.
Good evening. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order here. City Plan Commission on September 6, 2022. It is 6 o'clock p.m. I'll start with a roll call. Weeza is excused. Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Cooper is excused. Ilton.
Here.
Rice is excused. And Schuler.
Here.
We have a quorum for 0. Second item, although not on the agenda, we are without a chairperson. So as interim deputy assistant to the acting chairperson, I will call nominations open for anyone who wishes to take over the chair of this great body itself.
I nominate Mary Kneebone.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I second it, absolutely.
There's a second.
Where's my hammer?
Per the rules and regulations of the city, I have to
I knew
ask,
you had that
I think
power
3 more
hunger.
times.
Yeah.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? And for a third time, any other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of Mayor Kneebone as chair, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Chair Kneebone, this is your problem.
All right, so the second item on the agenda, number 2, is a report of the August 1st, 2022 meeting of the City Plan Commission. Any comments, questions, changes?
I guess I would comment that if it were ranked choice voting, you would have been my second and third choice as well. And I move for approval of the minutes.
Second. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any other questions? Any questions from the floor? I need a bigger hammer, I can tell already. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Motion passes. Number 3, public hearing and action on a request from Mark and Janice Klein to rezone the property located at 5410 Windy Drive from RLD, Low Density Residence District, to R3, Single and Two-Family Residence District, consistent with Chapter 23.01 and several parens. Director.
Okay, fairly straightforward request. Anytime a property is annexed into the city of Stevens Point, within our own ordinance, those properties come in as low-density residential. For the sake of consistency within our comprehensive plan and the surrounding properties, we do often recommend that these properties go through rezoning immediately after an annexation. And so that is what's before you this evening. The properties that surround the subject parcel are zoned R3, single and two family. And so I will state that there is, no major land use changes to this specific property. The property that was annexed recently will likely remain single family. But as always, just similar to the properties around it, there is always the opportunity for two family or a 0 lot line development that could occur at this at a later time. City staff would recommend approval as presented. You can see on the screen itself, you do have a fair amount of R3 around it. The parcels that are unidentified are within the town of Hull. You also have highway commercial on the south side of the property as well. So I would recommend approval. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions before the body opens it up for the public hearing component of this meeting.
Oh, that's right. We have to do open the public hearing at this point, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so the public hearing is now open. Public hearing is now open. And public hearing is now open. Hearing none, no comments.
There is no written comment. We did receive one comment or question from the public regarding, is this going to result in a land use change? Is there going to be a 0 lot line duplex developed, anything like that? And the short-term answer is no. Of course, long-term within that zoning district, you do have the option to build a duplex or 0 lot line or a single-family home as well. So.
That would definitely be consistent with everything else in the neighborhood on Windy and Sandy, so and woodland behind it. So, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, based on the discussion and action at last month's meeting and the finding of facts in the staff report, I would recommend approval based on these staff recommendations, including the staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the commission? From the public, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, I'm in favor. It's definitely consistent with the neighborhood. So I don't have any problems with it either. It's in my council district, so, definitely supporting. So we have a motion and a second. We'll go to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public hearing and action on a request from Doug Stingle representing the Schmeekly Reserve Visitor Center for a conditional use permit to construct a ground-mounted solar array on an unaddressed parcel off of North Point Drive, consistent with chapter 23.02 and several paragraphs, or parens. Any director comments first?
I'll kick this one over to our associate planner.
Okay, Mr. Kuhn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the request before you is to construct a second solar array. If we go to the next slide, Director, you can see the proposed solar array is shown on the right-hand portion of the screen, and the location of that will be immediately to the east of the existing solar array, which was approved by this body a few years back. One thing that I want to reiterate, and it's mentioned in the staff report, is that this conditional use request is not for the solar array itself. The use of the solar array, that is a permitted use. The purpose of this conditional use request is for setbacks. Technically, since this property is zone conservancy, a 50-foot street setback is required. However, our zoning code does allow for lesser street setbacks for similar type uses like solar arrays. So the applicant is requesting a 35-foot setback. Like I said, any structure can have no less than 25 feet for street setback, so this would fall in line with the spirit of the zoning code. So would recommend approval.
Okay, clarifying questions prior to the public hearing? Public hearing is now open.
Hi.
At the podium, and name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Doug Stingle, 1932 Church Street. I'm the gentleman who submitted this. And just wanted to say thank you and just kind of give you an idea. It's going to be a carbon copy of the one that exists there today. We're just gonna put another one in just slightly to the east of it is the plan, with the idea that this is going to offset electric consumption at Schmeekly Reserve, particularly with all of the new facilities that are there. Sorry, with the new restroom facilities and the Green Circle Head. They're using a lot more electricity, and then we've also got a couple of electric car charging stations that we put in with the first one. So this is going to be just an updated version of that one, so the capacity of the solar array in total will be a little bit larger. That's just because the solar modules have become a little bit more powerful in the last 2 years since we put that first one in. But any other questions, I'm happy to answer those questions if I can help.
Thank you. Alder Morrow.
More on the alder for this area. I think this is a great I think it's a great idea. It's the technology is getting better and better, and I think we're going to see a lot more of these around the state and around the U.S. as well. And this goes with what the UWSP is doing with renewable energy and trying to be on the edge of everything else. Thank you.
Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open. Okay, no more, were there any written comments or online?
None.
Any questions? Oh, I guess we need a motion ahead of discussion.
I'd make a motion to approve per staff recommendations.
Okay,
Second.
and a second from Schuler. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any question from the commissioners?
I think I asked this question last time when it first came in, but I was wondering about vision concerns, sight lines or anything, but last time there wasn't, so I wouldn't think there are any this time.
No, the beauty of these ground-mounted systems is that they are pretty high up in the air, and so if they were adjacent to any of the entryways into the parking lot, you know, we would definitely make sure that they're out of the vision triangle. And quite honestly, most of the time, the vision triangle is located within the right-of-way, and we wouldn't permit any type of development like this within the right-of-way itself. So there's no concern from staff.
Good, thanks.
Any other questions or
Madam
comments?
Chairwoman, I sit on the board of the Friends of Schmeekley Reserve, and for that reason, I'm going to abstain from voting on this
Okay, appreciate
as
that.
much as I'd like to.
Well, even though I don't have one, I do applaud the fact that they have electric car charging stations there. So I think that's a trend that we should encourage, and if this will help continue that and kind of be a trailblazer for the community, I think it's a good thing too. So, any other comments or questions, concerns?
I guess I have a question. Does Mark sitting out affect the quorum issue?
Nope, the commissioner will still count towards the total quorum, but you would still need the 3 total votes to move it forward.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody else? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We'll take that to the vote. All those in favor would vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And let the record reflect that I abstained.
Record is reflected.
All right. Item number 5. We have all these public hearings tonight.
Just a crowded room full of people.
I
ready
can
to talk.
see, yes, indeed. So, agenda item 5, public hearing and action on a request from the city of Stevens Point to amend chapter 23 zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code of the city of Stevens Point. Said request amends section 23.05 relating to the bylaws of the zoning board of appeals in accordance with Wisconsin statutes 62.23 and a couple of parens. I think, Mr. Kuhn, were you the lead on this?
Yeah, I can.
think?
Thank you, Chair. So when the city adopted our zoning ordinance several decades ago, one of the requirements through state statutes is that the council adopts a zoning board of appeals and establishes the composition criteria, establishes really what are the type of items that the zoning board of appeals renders a decision on. You know, in this case, variances, administrative appeals, and there's several sections through state statutes that outlines all of that. I won't get into detail with that, but for the purpose of this meeting tonight is that our city's zoning code in establishing the zoning board of appeals outlines these requirements of the zoning board of appeals through state statutes verbatim in our zoning code. And several years ago, the state updated the bylaws for how zoning board of appeals should govern. However, the city, in response to that, has not updated our zoning code to reflect that. Now, some of these changes include just providing definition of what an area variance is, what a use variance is, outlining some burden of proof criteria for unnecessary hardships, and then outlining the appeal process for any decision made by the zoning board of appeals. Last thing I'll note, and this is mentioned in the staff report as well, is that this action brought before you all tonight will not change how the zoning board of appeals has functioned in the past. This is merely just a housekeeping item to make sure that our zoning code reflects how the city's zoning board of appeals has been functioning and how the state requires the zoning board of appeals to function. So with that, I'll kick it back to the chair.
Okay. Any questions before the public hearing? Public hearing is now open. Public hearing is open. And the public hearing is still open. Okay, and hearing no comments from anybody in the room or online, I guess before we discuss, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd move approval.
Okay,
I'll second.
and a second. Questions or comments from the commissioners? I'll open it up again to the folks that are here. Any questions? Okay, well, that's easy. We've got a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, public hearing and action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Section 7.4 of the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission Design Guidelines as it relates to required approvals to construct a new accessory structure. Director?
I will kick this one over to, Mr. Kuhn, who has served as the quasi-historic officer for the city since he came on board.
Alright, thank you, Director. So if you go to the next slide, before I get to the heart of this agenda item, I want to talk a little bit about the approval process in general that's brought before the Historic Preservation Commission. So, short answer, any type of improvement outside of general maintenance requires some sort of approval if the property in question is located within one of these three boundary areas: the Design Review District shaded in green, the Matthias Mitchell Public Square Historic District shaded in brown or tan, and then the Clark Street Historic District shaded in pink. If we go to the next slide, here just shows a summary taken verbatim from these design guidelines showing the types of improvements and what type of approvals are required. So general maintenance is something that does not require staff approval. This would be items such as caulking, tuck pointing, removal of landscaping, things of that nature. Minor works would require staff approval, so staff would review the request. If we feel it's in the spirit of how the Historic Preservation's design review guidelines require for that given improvement, we can issue our approval for that work. And then contrast major works, these would be items like a new building, addition to an existing building, demoing a building, more intense projects that would require the review and approval from the commission as a whole. So going forward with this first item, the required approvals for new accessory structures, how the commission's design review guidelines state is that the construction of any accessory structure, regardless of size, requires the commission's approval. And the conversation as to potentially setting a threshold as to what would constitute full commission approval really set stage a few months ago when an applicant in the design review historic district came to myself looking to construct a 24 square foot prefab shed in their backyard. Technically, that didn't require a building permit, but based off of how the commission's guidelines state, it did have to go before that body for review and approval. And ultimately, my perspective, likewise the Historic Preservation Commission's perspective is as well, is that we should use that 25 square foot threshold to determine whether or not a new structure should be brought for the commission for review, or smaller structures that can be reviewed by city staff. So what we're proposing before you tonight is that any new accessory structure under 25 square feet can be reviewed by staff, making sure it aligns with the commission's guidelines. Anything more than 25 square feet would still require approval. And last thing I'll note is that the Historic Preservation Commission did recommend approval of this ordinance amendment during their meeting last month.
Okay, any questions from the commissioners ahead of the public hearing? Okay. Public hearing is now open. Public hearing is open. And public Public hearing is open. Hearing no comments from anyone, would entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve. Is there staff recommendations here? I don't,
To approve.
Yeah, the staff recommendations, the ordinance that's included within the packet.
approve per staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second by Schuler.
Arnson and Hilton is what I have, is that
Oh,
correct?
I'm sorry, my bad.
Stealing my thunder.
Questions, any more questions for clarification?
No, I guess
or-
I just thought about this a little bit, and it does have a level of control for, you know, staff is gonna look at it, so it's not like they can put up something, you know, gaudy or obnoxious or something at will, so, no, I'm good with that.
And there is the safeguard that if staff doesn't feel comfortable, or if the applicant disagrees with staff's decision, they can always take it to historic preservation. So,
All right, so that's the alternative, there's, an appeal.
Correct, so staff cannot deny a design review, request. We would essentially, as the director mentioned, it would be kicked back to the commission if the applicant would not want to amend their proposal.
It seems to me, what, 25 square feet, 5 by 5, that's not even a very good sized shed at this point.
An outhouse would work, but it has other limitations.
So, it sounds pretty good to me. Any questions or comments from the folks that are here online? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. We'll take that to a vote. Those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. So we go to item number 7. Public hearing and action on a request. Yeah, okay, right. Make sure it's not, I'm not reading the same thing. From the City of Stevens Point to amend section 7.4 of the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission Design Guidelines as it relates to required approvals for the renewal of expired design review certificates. I would think that's Mr. Kuhn again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned, during the last agenda item, for any minor work or major work that's approved by the commission, provided approval is obtained, staff will in turn provide the applicant a design review certificate, which is effectively the Historic Preservation Commission's version of a building permit showing that it met their criteria. And per the commission's design guidelines, that design review certificate expires 1 year after the approval is granted. Now, a couple slides earlier when I showed, or when the director showed the major and minor work section, one of the major works that was outlined was the renewal of an expired design review certificate on projects of substantial proportion. Staff's perspective on this is that it's pretty difficult in this day of age for a project of substantial proportion to be completed within 1 year, just given labor shortages, supply chain issues, approval process needed to get through the state. So what staff is recommending is removing that section as a major work and instead implanting that within the minor work section. So when the 1 year expiration is up, staff can review the request, review the project, making sure it's still kosher with the approval that was obtained, and then ultimately issue them a updated design review certificate. And like I mentioned during the last agenda item, Historic Preservation Commission did recommend approval of this amendment as well.
Questions from the commission first?
And that reapproval would be for another year?
Correct.
Okay, public hearing is now open. Public hearing is now open. Alder Christensen, you sure you don't have anything to say?
Real rowdy crowd tonight, so.
And for the third time, the public hearing is open. Okay, Hearing no apparent desire for comments, ahead of questions from the commission, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the revision.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further questions or clarification from the commissioners?
Piling a lot of work on Adam here, it seems to me.
That's why he gets paid the big bucks, so.
Rather a historic evening, I'd say, tonight. And with that, anybody,
Still got one more.
before we go to a vote? They'll need the hammer pretty soon. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that one carries. Number 8, a public hearing and action on a request from the city of Stevens Point. You guys have been busy this last month, to amend section 6.1.2.6 of the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission Design Guidelines as it relates to demolition review guidelines. Mr. Kuhn?
Thank you, Chair. So last item before you regarding our Historic Preservation Commission reflects the commission's design guidelines. So there's about 8 or 10 design guidelines, which is akin to, say, conditional use standards here in this, that's reviewed by this commission. There's a list of criteria. All of these criteria have to be met. If one of these guidelines are not met, that would warrant the commission to recommend denial on the request. And one of the guidelines specifically that was of interest for the commission to amend related to hardship claims made by the applicant. So currently what section 6.1.2.6 says is that an applicant, a property owner of a historic site, can claim any financial hardship that would be prevalent if the demolition or if the repair of a historic structure would cost a significant amount of money. However, if the deteriorated state of that building is due to factors made by the property owner, that would essentially be created or be classified as a self-created hardship and would not meet the spirit of this demolition guideline. The Historic Preservation Commission, they had interest in more so expanding this guideline to include both current property owner and previous property owner. So the example that the commission gave is, say the director has a historic building, brings it to a state of disrepair, sells it to me, and I want to request demolition of that right away. The commission's perspective is that that's not in the spirit of the demolition guidelines, is that it should be really put on the new property owner to use all resources available to bring that historic structure back up to a state of good repair. If it's using our facade improvement grant program, if it's using historic tax credits, or other financial resources available. So what the Historic Preservation Commission is recommending, and what staff is in approval of, is what's shown on the screen, the highlighted portions being the new insert, and then the striked out versions located right below that. So I can take any questions, comments that the commission has as well.
So that kind of ties into the due diligence of the buyer, being aware of
Correct.
such things.
Correct.
Any other comments ahead of the public hearing? Okay. The public hearing is now,
I have a question, just
Okay.
to play devil's advocate. What if the owner dies? And some person that's a stranger to this whole situation, and unbeknownst to them, inherits this property? Are they bound by this too?
As currently written, yes, there would be.
As proposed.
As proposed,
Yeah.
yes.
anybody else? Think about that. Public hearing is now open. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is open. Okay, no comments. Anybody write in anything?
No.
Okay, ahead of discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or clarifications from the commissioners?
Is that something we can add a condition to if we so desire, or would it have to come back?
So, my recommendation would be, if you're uncomfortable with it, kick it back to historic preservation for further consideration.
With guidance.
Yeah, with comments, right, and so, you know, I guess what would be the question, is it that of, you know, what if somebody inherits a property, they aren't aware of the condition of the property? Should they be exempt from the demolition guidelines, that are proposed?
Yeah, I think not. I wouldn't suggest it, but,
Okay.
tossing it out there.
Would, I mean, that could be a big hardship on someone to inherit a property that they really have no interest in.
Well, do you have to accept an inheritance?
No.
No idea.
Jeff does.
I guess if you could give maybe a little, more information on why the, historical board felt that this change was really necessary and what they hope to accomplish with it. And it might be restating something you've already said, but I guess just to clear up any question about why it might have been needed in the first place.
Yeah, good question. So the perspective of the Historic Preservation Commission was how this design, demolition guideline is currently written, that there's effectively a loophole for, because how it's currently stated is, if I own a property, if I bring it into a state of disrepair, I could sell it to the director, and he could request demolition, and the director could claim that he meets his criteria because he himself did not bring the building into a state of disrepair. It was the previous property owner. And what the commission's perspective is that a demolition should be a option of last resort. That there should be other actions taken to restore the building back into a good standing. As I mentioned, using financial incentives offered by the city or offered through the state Historical Society, National Register of Historic Places. So really the perspective is using all options out there outside of actually demoing the structure. And if that's the option of last resort, and if that's needed, then it would be up to the commission for their approval.
Okay, so as I understand it, the district is in place to preserve the sort of structural aesthetic of this defined area. And with that being the primary driver, it's seen as a way to get around preservation, to say that, hey, look at this, I'm dealt a bad hand because of this, I'd like to just tear it down.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
A really good example would be the Fox Theater. You know, the previous owners had let it fall into disrepair. There was a new owner that purchased it, the Arts Alliance or Career Portage County. Under this, they could have probably argued that, well, we didn't create the state of disrepair, ergo, we shouldn't have to fall within any of these demolition requirements, we should be able to have it demolished. This is just fixing that loophole.
Thank you.
One would think that'd be the kind of thing a realtor would say, by the way, this is in a historic district, you might wanna, you know, to a prospective buyer.
You do have to disclose that on,
Oh,
some
so,
real estate transactions.
I wondered
And then
about that, yeah, so,
As part of a special assessment letter, the city also does make sure the title company is aware that, a property falls within a historic district. And if there's any outstanding violations, let's say we have orders on it to be repaired, those would be included as part of a special assessment letter that goes through with every transaction that occurs,
So there would be some protection for a buyer. They wouldn't necessarily be going in with no knowledge of what's in store
The attorney
beyond
has it.
seeing what it looks like, so.
Attorney Beveridge has his hand raised. Logan, you can speak if you so choose. I saw your hand
Oh.
raised.
Sorry, yeah, so I think this is an important protection and, throwing out there the possibility that somebody inherits something and it's in a state of disrepair and it's starting to whittle it down to a pretty unusual and rare scenario. But I think, if one of your relatives allows a piece of property to deteriorate to such an extent, it certainly is going to lower the value of the asset you've just inherited, but it's probably unlikely to make that value negative or zero. And in the event that somebody does inherit something that truly is an albatross, well, I guess we can deal with that situation if and when it occurs. But I think the vast majority of situations are not going to be quite that unusual.
Any other questions or comments? Sounds good. All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor would indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
And was that
3-1.
3-1? Motion carries. Number 9, a request from Hannah Bukovic, representing the Golden Sands Resource Conservation and Redevelopment Council, for an exception to fencing standards to install perimeter fencing on an unaddressed parcel bounded by West Whitney Street and West Cornell Avenue, consistent with chapter 23.01 and a couple of parens. Probably get in trouble for not saying those out. Director,
Fairly straightforward request, before you this evening. The applicant's requesting for an 8-foot tall perimeter, fence surrounding the subject property. Within our current, zoning code, privacy fencing is really not allowed within 10 feet of the street or alley right-of-way. It can exist if it's no more than 3 feet in height. I don't know about you, but I see deer jump over 3-foot-high fences all the time to eat plants. Not all the time, but I've seen it. So this would be something we've approved in the past for various community gardens. Fairly straightforward request, because we have approved this type of thing in the past. Staff does recommend approval. There is no concern as it relates to vision triangles. The zoning administrator's already addressed that through the proposed fence line that's on the screen as well. So this is a kitty corner from Mead Park, as an example. This site right here is the city's pickleball courts, which are heavily used, by the way, so. And Amy is on the phone to speak beforehand if there's any questions from the body. This is not a public hearing, this is a simple motion second.
Did I hear correctly that the staff recommendation was for approval?
That's correct. I'm sorry. It says deny, boy, never mind. Mr. Kuhn, I am reading that incorrectly, you should have stopped me.
just gonna say, wait,
You're going through your soliloquy there.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'm embarrassed, sorry.
So we've heard from staff saying it's very similar to many other requests that have been granted, and we're gonna, okay. I just wanted to clarify that for just a
This is
second.
what happens when the director just goes on and doesn't fully understand the request. So my sincerest apologies, board.
questions or comments from the commissioners, and then we'll go to public.
What would this fence be like? I mean, is this a solid fence, an open fence? What is this?
8-foot tall privacy fencing is what's being proposed by the applicant.
You mean like the sentry fence?
Of the same vein, specifically with color, type of wood, I'm not sure if, I believe the applicant had a image of the proposed somewhere. If the applicant on the phone would want to speak further about material of the fencing.
This is Amy Thorstensen for Golden Sands RC&D. It's, wood posts with, wire. It's a wire fence. I have not heard the term privacy fence used in our, discussions of what the materials would be.
So we and the deer could see through this fence.
Yeah, it would just be a wire fence.
Yeah, so,
The list of materials includes corner posts, horizontal braces, wall posts, wire fencing, 330 feet of wire fencing, corner hardware, staples, gates. I'm not sure where the term privacy fencing came from.
So it's sort of this is Jeff Schuler, sort of like a typical rabbit fencing or other type of sort of like green, large, gauged fence you'd see at hardware stores for gardens?
It's wire fencing, so it's like welded wire squares, is my understanding. I'm filling in for Hannah, so I apologize for not off the top of my head knowing the answer to every question, but I dug through all of our details before the meeting to prepare. And what I have is wire fencing. I don't see anywhere in our documents where we stated privacy fencing.
so we have allowed in the past 8-foot tall fence, that you can see through, most notably probably on, 6th Avenue, just east of 2nd Street. So if it's not that of consistency with Century, and it is something where you can see through, it's less than 50%, what's the term that I'm blanking on? Transparency or opaque. I think staff would be comfortable with the proposed request and moving it forward, as opposed to being 100%, you wouldn't be able to see through it. And that's, I believe, what the applicant's proposing is more than 50% opaque. So I will stand by my earlier statement that staff does recommend approval,
I think that's
given the new information.
one of the more quality saves I've seen. I think that.
Thank you.
Also that, given the fact that it's a one-way street directly across the street from a baseball diamond in a park, very wide open, the corner has been used as this for quite some time, that this doesn't seem like an unreasonable request given the location and the type of thing they're trying to achieve.
I would just add that if they're trying to keep out rabbits, they're gonna have to have a tighter mesh at the bottom.
I was gonna say that, yes, I used to have a garden and it had those little square and, some little baby bunny got in there and ate all my beans down to the stalk. And that was the end of my garden, vegetable garden. So good luck with that. Comments from the public? Alder Morrow.
Alder Morrow, District 11, as a person who's had battle with deer myself, and I've lost lots of crops this year, I'm totally in favor of this. Thank you.
Do we,
The only thing
are
that
we-
you might wanna
Go ahead.
add is, that the, proposed fence is consistent with the applicant described and subject to staff review. That would be the only thing. Otherwise, you are approving a taller fence, adjacent to the right-of-way, which is still a requirement within our zoning code to be approved by the
Subject to staff approval of materials.
Yep, totally fine.
I wondered if we should, say, come back next month with a revised application? Or is it enough to,
I don't think you need to.
Okay.
I think we can handle it.
okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion then, or,
He has a
go
question.
ahead.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve first. Approve the motion contrary to staff recommendations?
I guess that's the right way to put it.
Do we,
Just move approval of
You would just move approval.
Yeah.
Move to
And then
approve.
with any conditions you'd like to see.
Staff approval.
Well, and that kind of goes back to my question, is the concern that the staff has was the opaque nature, the privacy nature, and limiting vision, but it sounds like that's not a part of it, it's just gonna be an open welded wire fence that you can see through, and that would be acceptable. Should I add an amendment saying that don't make it privacy fencing, don't put vision slots in there, or just good as is?
I think if you recommend approval, subject to staff approval, we can review and take the spirit of this conversation and apply it here. So there's no need to bring it back for another round of meetings.
All right, yep, then I make the motion
Second.
to approve.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Anything else from the floor, or from Amy? Any more?
That's all for me. We'll confer with staff to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements.
All right, then we've got a motion and a second. We'll take it to a vote. All those in favor vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Item 10, a request from the City of Stevens Point to grant an electric underground easement to the Wisconsin Public Service Corporation for the property located at 931 Michigan Avenue. Director.
For the sake of not putting my foot in my mouth, I'll just let the associate planner take this one as well.
All right, so the request is in association with the improvements at Community Field, most notably for the lighted sign that's on the, let's see, this would be the north side of the football field. Director Kramer has been working with WPS as far as the language of the agreement is concerned, and he has no concerns and would recommend approval.
Any questions ahead of,
Just to clarify, it's not a natural gas pipeline.
Not a natural gas pipeline.
Okay, thank you. Just checking.
comments from the audience? I'll entertain a motion then.
Move to approve?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, Schuler and Arnson. So, any further comments or questions?
Does staff know, whether or not WPS would intend to replace the shrubbery or tree line that it looks like they're going to have to deal with?
As far as if it would be placed over it, or,
Well, with something comparable in some way that's gonna keep the greenery there?
It's likely to be a board, electrical line that's put in, so there
Oh,
wouldn't be any
it's-
trenching
okay.
or anything like that.
Okay.
Any more comments? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. I'll entertain a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion's carried. Item 11, the July 2022 monthly report. Director.
This one I do know. So before you is the July 2022 monthly report. Again, very consistent with that of 2019 in terms of number of permits, year-to-date fees collected from those permits. Very happy with through July where the city's been going in terms of net new construction, a number of duplexes issued, 2 families. The single families are new mobile homes that are located on Minnesota Avenue. And then the electrical permit for the Tommy's Car Wash was issued as well. So, would recommend approval. More than happy to answer any other questions that the body might have.
Any questions, comments? From public, any questions for the director? Okay, would entertain a motion to accept the report.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other comments? Last chance, anybody? All those in favor would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that Carries. And item number 12 is the director's report.
Number of development updates, Great Northern Distilling is moving along exceptionally well. You will see as you drive by now, steel framing and some exterior elements are being added the next several weeks. The Banter mixed-use building, which is a former Point Motel site, the 4th floor is currently being framed in, so that one is moving along swimmingly as well. I should note on the north side yard that building 3 will likely begin work later this month or early October. Seat approvals for that 3rd building have been reviewed and approved. That's just for the building aspect. We're still waiting on, I believe, the plumbing and electrical state reviews as well. Convent redevelopment project is also moving along exceptionally well. The framing in the 1965 edition is being completed this week. And then the 3 townhomes, I believe the footing foundations, underground plumbing is underway for that as well. We did hold a ribbon cutting for the GI Associates Clinic that's in the Portage County Business Park. That was held on September 1st, so anyone who's in need of any GI work or colonoscopies, it's a very nice facility. We also held a ribbon cutting for Caribou Coffee on September 2nd, 2022, last Friday. So Chris Clay-Smith has continued to work with our downtown businesses on establishing the Business Improvement District. I would suspect that something will be coming back to this body later this year yet. And in other updates, asbestos abatement began at Edgewater Manor today. So you should see crews there over the next several weeks as they prepare that building for demolition. Finally, Sharon Patoka, who is the city's longtime assistant city assessor, passed away at the end of August. She worked for the city in the assessing department for 23 years and worked in the land records department with Portage County prior to that, and collectively had about 40 years of service to the residents of the city and the county. She just retired in September of 2021, so our thoughts are with her family. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions that the body might have. Otherwise, I would recommend approval and adjournment.
Any comments from the commissioners? Questions from the audience? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? Okay, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries, and we are adjourned at 6:52.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.